Folks, today we are doing a comprehensive breakdown of week 5 of the NFL season that of course did not disappoint, with plenty of dramatics and chaos that we have come to expect from the best league in the entire world. Now, if you're new here, I can make you a few promises that by the end of this video, not only are you going to have some of the strongest, most unfiltered opinions, they usually tend to be pretty accurate too. And so on this channel, we are here to create a space, not just recapping games. We are starting off with the 5 things that have absolutely caught my attention after this week. And we're not going to just talk about Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets in the same way that every national program has done ad nauseum. I'm going to be sharing lots of relevant stats that you might not have known about, trends, and some seismic shifts that I see that are going to shape the rest of the NFL season. My hope after every video is that you'll tell me where I missed the mark, but also walk away as a better fantasy football owner, sharp better, and sound much more locked in and educated during those conversations with your friends who think they know more about the sport than you do. Now, I'm gonna timestamp and link these relevant sections that we're going over so that if you wanna hop to a specific topic or a specific game, you can do so right here. And as always, appreciate a like and subscribe. Let's hop right into it. Now, the first thing on this list and/or storylines that have my attention, step forward, the New York Football Giants. Holy shit, has that defense undergone a remarkable transformation. Now, for folks who are calling it reminiscent of the 2007 Super Bowl defense, hold the brakes. But what we are seeing in week 5 is significant improvement. They dominated the Seahawks with 7 sacks, matching their total from the first 4 games combined, and PFF is saying that the Giants' pass rush win rate is nearly 53% against Seattle, which was the highest single game rate this season. And boy, do they have an emerging and certified rookie cornerback in Deonte Banks. He's been a standout, and he allowed just 2 catches for around 20 yards with Seattle's receiving corps. It's easy to see why they used a first-round pick on this guy. He comes off like a smooth and steady NFL veteran, which is worth its weight in gold in this NFL. Number 1 DBs do not grow on trees. You and I both know that. His passer rating when targeted is 74.2, which ranks 7th amongst all cornerbacks with at least 100 coverage sacks. In general, he only allows a 54% completion rate and has also only allowed 153 yards, 1 TD, and has 1 interception just through 5 games. And with the rest of the dudes, we know that a dominant defense can no doubt compensate, especially with the strength of that defensive line that can cover up Daniel Jones's mistakes. And the Giants defense ranks 8th in overall pressure rate through week 5. Do not be surprised if this team is in somewhere near the top 5 range by the end of this NFL season. Now for number 2, how many channels are talking about the Arizona Cardinals in the same way that I am? Now, we don't want to overreact here, but this team has looked a lot better than anyone in the national media expected. And I've talked about them since week 1 as one of the emerging teams after I saw their opening game. And with them upsetting and coming back pretty decisively against the 49ers in their first win against them since 2021. Listen, he's often forgotten because he plays where he plays in the time slot that he plays, but he doesn't deserve to be left out of the conversation as some of these other really great young dual threat guys. In the 49ers game, he had 83 rushing yards, absolutely embarrassed them on a run to the house, and their offensive line impressed the hell out of me. According to Next Gen Stats, they allowed pressure on just 22% of dropbacks, which is their lowest rate since week 1 of 2022. And some NFL articles and experts are saying that although this line has been criticized, they've showed significant improvement, and their ability to give Kyler time in the pocket to throw, as well as hold their blocks long enough for him to extend and use his straight line speed, it could be very, very dangerous. And tell me why they couldn't challenge for the 2nd spot in the division. I'm telling you to keep an eye on this offensive line, their running game with James Conner too, who's one of the hardest runners in the NFL and one of my favorite guys to watch, keep your eye out on the Cardinals. And when they start flirting a little bit with the playoffs, don't say I didn't tell you so. Now hold on a damn minute. If you haven't watched my NFC division winners and predictions, now might be a good time to go and do so. One of the things that I picked up in the offseason was the quiet hire of Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator in Jeff Hafley. Not a name a ton of people know, but one of the things that stood out to me with that hire was that they were going to play a ton more man-to-man coverage, which accentuate the strengths of newer guys brought in like Xavier McKinney, who is absolutely freaking balling out this year. And Green Bay's defensive dominance absolutely has mine attention and should have yours too. They're leading the league in takeaways at 3 per game. Their third down defense is stellar, holding teams under a 30% conversion rate on third down, which is 6th best in the NFL. And as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, I can tell you what taking the ball away can do for an organization. I'm pretty sure we got a couple Super Bowl rings to show you why that matters. Now, just imagine what this team could look like if their offense can get even half as good as their defenses. Xavier McKinney might be defensive signing of the offseason with how well that he is playing. McKinney has an NFL high of 5 interceptions. He's had 1 interception per game for a total of 5 this year, which ranks highest in the NFL. No surprise with Hafley's scheme. I told you it was going to look good. I didn't know it was going to look this good. And when it comes to having a conversation about Green Bay competing in the NFC and potentially coming out of it, with how close things were against the 49ers last year in the divisional round, there is no reason to believe with the 49ers fall off thus far this season. I mean, when was the last time they were 2-3 after week 5? There's no reason to believe with that an improved defense of this caliber on top of another year of development of Jordan Love, the confidence that the organization and fan base has in him. There's a reason that they say defense wins championships, and I'm always going to lead with that. As a Tampa fan, I am born and bred to believe in defense. Where do you think the scheme Tampa 2 comes from? So you're never gonna see me complaining about low-scoring games or the Green Bay Packers having 12 takeaways by week 5. Next, Aaron Rodgers struggles throwing from the pocket. I thought we were going to have to get to the end of the year with the 40-year-old man decline before we got to a place where he's skying passes in a dome and has 4 interceptions in his first 3 games, which is his highest rate since his rookie season. His adjusted completion percentage is 72.5, which ranks 25th among qualified QBs per PFF. When you pay a guy to come in and win you a Super Bowl, and one of the best things that he does is move well and be extremely efficient by taking care of the ball, and he's moving like an old man out on the field and getting embarrassed by the Jets' former number 3 overall pick in Sam Darnold, making bonehead interceptions to the second level of the defense, getting returned for a pick 6. There's no way that this couldn't have your attention. His deep ball accuracy has significantly declined and was absolutely his trademark for most of his career. His completion percentage, according to Warren Sharp, on passes 20 yards plus is just 28.6%, which is down from 43% from his last full season. This doesn't just have to do with his surrounding cast, and I don't want to hear that. The Jets, I'm sure you've heard, have scored the exact same amount of points up until this point as they did with Zach Wilson. That's what you brought this guy in for? To be a taller, more opinionated, and asshole version of Zach Wilson? I don't think so. And lastly, Deshaun Watson has no integrity. This is a guy who seems like he is completely checked out. And he has my attention because things are so much worse than I thought they could have ever been. For him to be leading in the Browns categories for such a historically poor performance tells you everything you need to know. He's the first Browns QB since 1999 to fail to throw 200 plus yards within the first 5 games. We're talking about a franchise who has a QB graveyard since the early 2000s. That might be the most infamous. His QBR is around 25, which is the lowest of any QB through 5 5 weeks since QBR was introduced in 2006. Bill Barnwell talks about how unprecedented this performance is for a QB of his former caliber and contract size. His EPA per play is in the negatives and ranks 31st out of 32 qualified quarterbacks. Now, the reason that I say he has no integrity is because this is a guy who simply doesn't look like he's trying. He doesn't look like a guy who really has a care in the world about doing well. I've never really believed that professional athletes at scale get their big contracts and then just mail it in for the rest of their career. I've never really believed that, because in this NFL, you can get a third or fourth contract as a QB with them playing as late as they are. So you're telling me Deshaun Watson doesn't want more money? Because right now, he sure as hell is playing like it, talking about, oh, I don't want to run, I don't want to get hit. And I think it's fair to say, with a guy of Watson's former athletic ability, it is so incredibly painful to watch him operate the pocket and single-handedly cause so many of these sacks. And Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk says that this could go down as one of the worst contracts in NFL history. And I don't even think that does this situation justice. Now we have another shit show in the Meadowlands caused by the owner, Woody Johnson, who wants to now go by Ambassador Johnson, and Aaron Rodgers. These two have cooked up another one for the ages. Now, before I start giving you some glaring trends, like the fact that the Green Bay Packers offensive line pass block win rate of 46% ranks 31st in the NFL, and how you might see Aaron Rodgers' time to throw improving from his time in Green Bay at 2.53 seconds to now 2.81 seconds, and think that's a positive thing and a good reflection on the offensive line. Unfortunately, that time has been spent running for his life rather than finding open receivers who we also know are not doing an okay job at separation. Now, let me just speak into this microphone very clearly. Very, very clearly. The Davante Adams trade objectively makes zero football sense. And the folks who are clamoring for it are Jets fans or people who picked the Jets to go deep into the AFC playoffs and maybe even to the Super Bowl. Basically, people who have completely lost their mind. It made no sense before when Saleh was the coach, and it makes even less sense now that he is out of the building. The New York Jets need to get their fucking priorities straight, which they haven't done in the history of Woody Johnson's tenure since the year 2000. I genuinely don't even know where to begin. This has so much nuance. Well, let's start with why nobody is winning Super Bowls because they have a great wide receiver on the outside. Nobody ever won Super Bowls by not building that offensive and that defensive line first. The only thing that Davante Adams is going to bring is a little ego boost to Aaron Rodgers, who once again, his behavior will be reinforced to getting more things that he wants. Now, you can argue in the comments, you can argue with the clouds if you think that he got Robert Saleh fired. I could care less, because we know who Aaron Rodgers is. We know what type of control he has on the franchise. And the last thing that any sane leader of a business would do is give that person who has significantly diminishing talent, is give that person more confidence and more power. The New York Jets have absolutely no shot. No chance. Sure, we can give props to Davante Adams for his ability to win in man coverage at the highest rate in the NFL at 47%. However, the Jets face the third highest rate in the league of zone coverage. So now you bring Davante in and you think they're going to start playing more man, just letting you walk right into what would be the major strength of the New York Jets? Absolutely asinine thinking. The only thing that the New York Jets and their leadership and fan base should be worried about is how to get Ambassador Johnson out of the front office. How can Chris start to take over? Because I'm old enough to remember the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going to the NFC Championship in 1999 after starting 2-3 in in the same way that the New York Jets are. The entire football world is laughing in your face. You have no idea what you're doing. You think this is a game. You are showing up to games with multiple chains that I have only seen rappers wear, and you need to worry about Aaron Rodgers' QBR of 41, ranking 25th amongst qualified quarterbacks. He hasn't had a lower net yards per attempt since becoming a full-time starter in 2008. And you think that Davante Adams is gonna help Aaron Rodgers' mobility? I mean, can Davante Adams block? Can he pick up a guard on a stunt? I mean, what are we talking about here? If you think that dismissing the guy on the offensive philosophy, which is the strength of your football team, if you think that that's going to fix your offense when you still have Nathaniel Hackett walking around with his head up his ass, then you know nothing about football. I've been on this platform many times telling you that Robert Saleh is not the right coach, Nathaniel Hackett is not the right offensive coordinator, and Aaron Rodgers sure as hell is not the right quarterback for that organization or any organization. He has everything that he's ever wanted, and he continues to accumulate more power and more control through manipulation, which is what he does best, by also getting other people to fall on the sword and leak stories saying that he had nothing to do with it. I'm an adult and will not be manipulated by Aaron Rodgers. Folks can say they're quote unquote all in with Aaron Rodgers, but the Robert Saleh hiring is truthfully the strangest way to handle all of this. The New York Jets should have fired Nathaniel Hackett if they wanted to maximize his window and get a legitimate offensive coordinator or someone who doesn't need to be supervised, and take back your franchise as the owner and the GM and say, hey, I'm sorry that your offensive buddy wants to stay and you want him to stay just as much, but we're kicking his ass to the curb, because it simply is not working. All of these people, including the owner, think that they work for kooky Aaron Rodgers, and I told you it was a disaster from the absolute beginning. Thursday night football with the Falcons and Buccaneers. Sure, some people are calling it the most exciting and best Thursday night football game ever, which to me feels like shit because my Buccaneers lost. But also, is that really a high bar with the horrible reputation that Thursday night football games have in the first place? One of the biggest glaring things to me from this game was how much laboring Kirk Cousins was doing just to get the ball out on short throws. It was clear that he warmed up later in the game, obviously to embarrass the Buccaneers in prime time, which they seem to do a really great job of. And this also is reflected in the stats. His depth of target in this game was 7.2, which is significantly lower than his career average, which indicates a reliance on shorter, high percentage throws. And my hunch is that it has to do with how uncomfortable he is still in the pocket, taking hits and driving off of that back foot. The first half was really ugly to watch in terms of him kind of being a fish out of water mechanically. I don't expect this performance from him at all moving forward, where he can slice and dice a defense that ranks pretty good in the Buccaneers on an individual level with the defensive backs. The Bucs are definitely dealing with health issues on the interior of that defensive line. They've got to get Kalijah Cansey back, and the loss of Servassier Dennis in coverage can account for their DVOA on passes over the middle of the field, which was worse than their season average. And one of the things that I want you to look out for is not getting too high on the Atlanta Falcons passing game and too low on the middle of that Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. I think we will have a much clearer picture next time that they play, which I wish was a little bit later in the season, but is at the end of October in the Bucs building. We'll see if Kirk really gets settled with his body and if the Buccaneers have enough defensive depth to really make a run at a championship. Now listen, man, we gotta have a conversation about the Miami Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa's absence and how it has completely exposed Mike McDaniel and how he might be the weakest link head coach on the offensive side of the ball from the Shanahan tree. The Dolphins' offensive DVOA has dropped by 37% without Tua, which is obviously the largest single player impact of this NFL season. Now, I have been critical of Tua Tua and clearly didn't understand the value of what he does pre-snap, how quickly he processes information, and how he's literally an accuracy and decision-making machine on the field. My concern with McDaniel and why I think he's really shown his ass here is because we have seen what Matt LaFleur and Kyle Shanahan have done with backup quarterbacks who may be selling car insurance right now. Think back to CJ Beathard. Think back to Nick Mullins with the 49ers. Nick Mullins was their third string quarterback. Malik Willis, people thought, could also be out of the league if he didn't get traded to Green Bay and Jordan Love gets hurt. I mean, guys who are elite and contextual play callers like Shanahan and LaFleur, just to name two, it really shows you are the one on the outside looking in. And it is extremely glaring for Mike McDaniel. I think it's fair to question if he's the right coach to get them over the hump of some of these more elite teams that are perennially deep into the playoffs like Kansas City and Baltimore. Can this team really hang with just an okay offensive play caller? Now remember, Mike isn't the one who stabilized that franchise. Brian Flores was. He was able to essentially get a nice little layup on to having a stacked roster, quarterback in place, it becoming a free agent destination for some of the top players in the league. Mike McDaniel's got it pretty made. And right now, he's not picking up the slack of what is happening without Tua. And so if you're the Miami Dolphins, you simply have to be questioning if this is the right coach for you, if Tua needs to walk away for health reasons at some point. Now, there's something I want to call out about making these massive judgments only 5 weeks into the season. You have to understand the early season statistical significance in performance. And what I mean by that, according to a study by 538, performance in the first 4 games has a 0.62 correlation with their final record compared to a 0.82 correlation for their performance in the last 4 games. And so there is a certain level of volatility in the beginning of early season performance. So take the Jacksonville Jaguars, for example. Despite their slow start, historical data suggests that their offensive DVOA typically improves by 15% in the second quarter of the season. And on the opposite side of things, the Baltimore Ravens' early success or somewhat success can be misleading because their point differential of plus 49 is inflated by a single blowout win. When adjusted for opponent strength, their DVOA ranks 7th, not first as their record might suggest. This period is critical for separating statistical noise from genuine trends. And as we continue our analysis, we'll focus on identifying which early season performance is likely to be sustainable based on advanced metrics and historical precedents. I want to talk about some lesser chatted about teams like the Carolina Panthers, who have seen a 27% increase in efficiency since moving on from Bryce Young. Their success rate on rushing plays has jumped from 38% to 48% per Warren Sharp's analysis. Jacksonville's Trevor Lawrence's struggles can actually be quantified. His on-target throw percentage of 72.4% ranks 28th among qualified quarterbacks, according to Pro Football Reference. This combined with the 4th highest drop rate in the NFL, it's created the perfect storm for offensive inefficiency, and getting their first win off their back could really help them start to make a significant run. This is the time of year where you really start to see what the guts of each team really looks like, because you might start 1-4 and still make a run deep into the AFC with how weak it has shown itself to be. Now, I'm not sure if CJ Stroud's Texans are still the same team. They had a very convincing win in the second half in week 5 that I certainly didn't think they'd be able to come back from after that really flat performance in the first half. But one of the things that always stands out, even when the rest of the team comes out flat, is how consistent Stroud is. He started the game 9 for 9, and he's always consistently able to throw his receivers open, and their explosiveness and with tenure of Stephon Diggs, who's a real veteran and respected, certainly has me and the rest of the NFL curious about what their next step will be. Now, to wrap up, we are making some data data-driven predictions and predictive analytics for the weeks ahead. The Rams' offensive DVOA has improved 12% since week 3, and I'm ultimately not a huge believer in the Rams at this point. They seem to be the most injured team in the league every year, and that improvement percentage obviously shows the potential for further growth, but they have the 3rd toughest schedule in the NFL moving forward. Now, we talked about how Green Bay, if they can get their offense clicking as well as the defense, and now you have an emerging tight end in Tucker Kraft who is dominating the Rams on Sunday. His route participation was 18% in week 1 to now 42% in week 5. That is going to give Jordan Love a weapon that nobody saw coming. His improved route running and consistency could make him a surprising key weapon in Green Bay's offense, and you know how much I love what Matt LaFleur is doing to maximize his guys' talents. Now for my 5 data-driven predictions based on the analysis of current trends and historical data. Number 1, Arizona will see a 20% increase in offensive DVOA over the next 8 games, potentially putting them in wild card contention. Aaron Rodgers' adjusted net yards per attempt will continue to decline, potentially leading to a quarterback controversy halfway through the season. The Browns will finish with their lowest offensive DVOA of any team with a $200 million quarterback in NFL history. And lastly, Green Bay will upset at least 2 teams with higher DVOA rankings in the playoffs, driven by their elite 3rd down and red zone defense. Now, let's have some fun in the comments about some unforeseen factors that we know can happen on any given Sunday and which is the most likely not to happen, and tell me what projections I missed. Listen, I appreciate you stopping by. We obviously tried something out new today, and I'm looking forward to getting your feedback on how you felt this new formula works for weekly recaps. Obviously, my goal here is to give you as much value as possible, and I appreciate the like, the subscribe, any engagement that you can give to support the channel. I look forward to dropping some occasional videos throughout the week when we see more can't miss storylines that I just have to talk to you about. And so I will see you next time.